Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm the Spicer and today's review of the entry grade RX-78-2 Gundam comes to you courtesy of Canadian Gundam. Canadian Gundam is your one-stop shop for all your Gunpla and Plomo needs here in North America. When you're perusing their catalog and placing your order, don't forget to use the promo code Gunpla Network for 10% off. Now the entry grade is pretty different. It is all pre-molded and pre-colored, so you're not going to get any stickers in the box, and it's designed for, as it specifies, entry. So all you need is nippers, and that's pretty much it, and that was the approach I took when building this. I wanted to actually try just building it with some basic nippers, not the God Hands, just some basic nippers I had had from previous experiences, and wanted to see how well this would fare in terms of nubs and everything like that. And I'm actually pretty pleased. This is actually a pretty cool thing. This reminds me of the advanced grade age kits that were all color accurate in terms of plastic, although they didn't really have a lot of articulation, whereas this actually has surprising amounts of articulation for quote-unquote entry grade. There's a lot of posability there. Now, of course, while I was trying to film, my cat Binks was like, hey, I want to be in the video, so he helped me with the unboxing portion of this, so you'll see him pop up here and there. But as you can see, the plates are actually, like I said, pre-colored and pretty much just separated in half where they would normally be connected for something like a high-grade sized runner. Then all of the white is kind of the same thing, and it all looks pretty accurate, nothing crazy. I will say there's not a lot of surface detail, so that's something to note, but once it's all put together, it looks good. Honestly, for the time it took in the posability, I kind of like this better than the old school, or quote-unquote old school, the HGUC Revive that came out several years ago, because they look pretty similar, except you didn't have to put any stickers on here, and there's honestly not a lot to panel line, and some people might find that kind of as a detractor, but as something that's designed for entry grade, just to be very basic, I think that plays into the gimmick slightly. Now there are a ton of opportunities if you want to go at this with anything. If you want to go at it with some paint, to try some paint, you've got some options there. Not a ton, but you have some that you can mess with. If you want to try scribing, this is something that's fairly inexpensive that you don't have to worry about messing up too much. So this is entry grade on so many different levels. It's entry grade for getting into Gunpla, just in general. It's entry grade for trying new techniques on something that's built or that is fairly quick and easy to build. So if you want to try some different techniques without, trying it on a master grade or something like that, or just spare parts, if you want it to be on something that's going to be complete, this is a really good way to do it. And I mean, it's the RX-78-2. It's of course not going to be the Origins or the G40 or maybe even the Global Beyond, but it's a really good representation for something that in most areas is going to cost you less than $10. So really nice, really good looking proportionally. Color accuracy is spot on, and it actually uses some interesting kind of high grade tech to hide the joints. So instead of being just a separate individual piece that you build for the elbow and knee joints, it's a lot more reminiscent of like the high grade Leo, where there's a cap that just goes over a fairly basic connection in there, and it works really well. It doesn't pop out, it holds very stably in there, and it doesn't limit the articulation, which is super important for something like this. This is really, I think, the ideal realized from back in the advanced grade days, where everything out of box is done. You don't have to mess with it. If you want to throw it on your shelf, you can, except they really pushed what they could do in terms of articulation, and in some ways, this is more articulate in some manners than even like I said, the older high-grade Revive RX-78-2. Now, of course, it has its limitations. I'm not going to go crazy and say it is the end-all be-all, but it is pretty impressive for something that's less than $10. I'm incredibly impressed. Now, just to give you some idea in terms of its art style and aesthetics, here we have it up against the anime robot Damashi RX-78-2, so something more accurate to the 1970s RX-78. We have the entry grade, and then we have the Origin Char Zaku 2, that's going to be more detailed, of course. And as, they go around, they look pretty good, honestly. I mean, it is going to have its own distinct style, but generally speaking, it fits in pretty well with either of these. Now, of course, it is going to be pretty standard in terms of something like the Beyond Global or the HGU-C Revive, but it matches in well enough with those that you could tell it's the entry grade, but not like immediately off a glance most of the time. It does lack surface detail, it does lack some accessories, but outside of that, there's not much by comparison that those other two kits are going to have that this doesn't. One thing I am very impressed with is the articulation on something like this. I was able to get it in quite a few fun little poses, and if you have it up on a display stand, it does have a 3mm peg in the bottom of the waist, so you can put it up on a display base from anything from the 30-minute mission series to just the regular Bandai display bases. And really, if you want to move it around and pose it around, you have a lot of options in terms of posability. You get a really nice ab crunch in the torso, the arms are ball jointed, they don't really fall off all that often, which is good. I don't actually know that I've had them pop off. The elbows give you a little bit more than 90, the knees give you more than 90, the feet are on a kind of a weird double joint in a way, to where you can get quite a bit of articulation in a lot of different areas, not just forward and back with them. The limitation here isn't in terms of articulation, with the exception of maybe the front skirt. You can separate that. It's a little harder because it's not two ball sockets, it's the rounded bar with the little flat piece on the bottom. But you can do it, it is possible, it's fairly easy. But they do have a little bit of a hard time flipping up with the torso in certain positions. But the limitation is the accessories. It is beam rifle and shield, and that is it. You do get 2 beam saber hilts that do fit into the hand, but you don't get beam saber blades. Now, if you've built Gunpla before, you have some extra beam saber blades laying around, and most of your high grade and real grade blades will fit in there, so that's pretty cool. But for someone who's new to Gundam, that is a little bit of a bummer. Little disappointed, honestly, there, but for something, like I said, once again, that's less than $10, it's really hard to find anything that's like, well, you kind of expect it for that price point. Honestly, if they continue this line, I would be super excited. This is one of those things that if you wanted to get someone into Gunpla or get someone a present for Gunpla that you really don't know if they're going to like it, this is inexpensive and it's very fast in terms of its build time. You don't have to worry about a lot of the cleaning up aspects. There are a few nub marks here and there that are fairly noticeable, but generally speaking, they're not all that bad, and for someone who's just getting into the hobby, they're pretty nominal, honestly. Very quick to build, very articulate, so you can have fun posing and playing with it. It's fairly stable, so you're not having things fall off. The grips on everything are really, really tight. Even like the grip on the beam saber hilt is super tight for something that I don't know that was necessarily meant to be held, which is really great. I honestly, if we're going to get holding hands, I would honestly prefer this kind of a style. I know it is not what the high grades do now, but I honestly like just being able to slide something in a hand and not have to take it apart. Just one less thing I have to worry about falling and disappearing into the void that is my floor. But generally speaking, impressed. If you are even the least bit curious for $10 this, or less than $10, or even around $10, I would say this is, just to satisfy your curiosity, something that is really reasonable in terms of a buy and in terms of a build. It's very simplistic, it's going to go very quickly, but that's kind of the fun of it, honestly, is just to see how straightforward it is and how much fun it is, honestly. This is something, it's not going to test you, but it does remind you, oh, quick, simple builds can actually be enjoyable. And the end result is just mind-blowing. Like I said, for something that's fairly inexpensive for what it is, I can't rave enough, honestly. This is really cool. I'm at a loss of words, even though I've typed some of this out. This is just, honestly, I cannot put into words how impressed I am for something like this. I was really expecting, even looking at promotional images and stuff, expecting something a lot closer to the old school advanced grades. And it's like, oh, it's going to be limited articulation, it's not going to have a lot of accessories, it's mostly just meant to be a statue with maybe some movement here and there, but this is, I think, a direction Bandai can go in, and they can learn a lot from this line in terms of what they can do to maybe make the high grade line a little bit more color accurate and rely less on stickers in the future. Just layering the different colors of plastic and the way it's all organized on the runners and the way it's just so easy to build. Like, baseline high grades could be this, and I would be 110% satisfied. There's nothing about this that I feel like is lacking in comparison to a high grade other than maybe surface details, and it doesn't have beam saber blades. But outside of that, which are fairly minor complaints, honestly, this is very impressive. I know I've said that like 1,000 times, but I cannot drive home enough. It is really cool. So, final thought, right? Just do it. That's it. It's like, even if you have like 4 other 144 scale RX-78-2s, and you're just thinking about buying something and you happen to see this at the store that you're at physically or online, I'd say Canadian Gundam, just, yeah, do it. It's fairly inexpensive, it's a fun build, and it's just fun to play with. That's something that I cannot speak highly enough of. The kits that are fun to play with are, I wouldn't say rare, but there's always something finicky about a certain kit, and this one I didn't have any finicky parts, which is great. I had to move the torso around for the front skirts, but that was super minor, and I'm just really impressed. So just do it. Yeah, 100%. This is a must buy. It's not going to be the flashiest thing on your shelf, but just in sheer amount of fun and freshness, yeah, absolutely. 100% a buy. I've been the Spicer, guys. Let me know in those comments down below if you have any questions for me, or if you have any questions or just comments since you've built this. If you have, just saying, hey, yeah, I like this, or hey, no, you're totally wrong. Let us know. As always, friends, please stay safe and keep on building.